Have you ever witnessed someone being cruel to innocent children and wished you could do something about it? Now imagine you had the power to change their lives forever, but nobody knew who you really were. That's exactly what happened when Marcus Chen, one of the wealthiest investors in Silicon Valley, walked into a small diner dressed like an ordinary construction worker. What he heard that day made his blood boil, and what he did next changed 3 lives forever. Pay close attention to this story, because the lesson here will restore your faith in humanity. The morning sun cast long shadows across the streets of Palo Alto as Marcus Chen stood in front of the mirror in his modest hotel room. He carefully buttoned up his worn flannel shirt, the fabric soft from years of washing, a few threads loose at the collar. He'd owned this shirt for over a decade, kept it specifically for days like this. Days when he needed to disappear into the background of ordinary life. Marcus studied his reflection with the same analytical eye he used when evaluating startup pitches. Faded Levi's jeans with authentic wear at the knees, not the expensive designer kind that cost $300 to look old. Steel-toed work boots that he'd actually broken in by wearing them on hiking trips, scuffed and worn in all the right places. A basic digital watch, the kind you could buy at any drugstore for $15. And finally, a navy blue baseball cap from a local hardware store, pulled low enough to shadow his face but not so low as to draw attention. Perfect. Nobody would recognize him as Marcus Chen, the man whose face had graced the covers of Forbes, Fortune, and Bloomberg Businessweek. The venture capitalist whose firm had invested early in companies that were now household names. The billionaire who turned a small inheritance from his grandmother into an empire worth over $3 billion. This was Marcus's secret ritual, something he'd been doing for nearly 8 years now. Once a month, sometimes twice if his schedule allowed, he would shed his expensive suits and designer watches, leave behind his penthouse and his driver, and spend a day living as the man he might have been if luck and hard work hadn't intersected at just the right moments in his life. He grabbed his worn leather wallet, the same one his mother had given him when he graduated from college 20 years ago, and headed out. Today, he'd chosen a neighborhood on the outskirts of Palo Alto, far from the gleaming glass towers of Sand Hill Road where his office overlooked the valley. This was a working-class area where families lived paycheck to paycheck, where the American dream felt more like an uphill battle than a promise. The streets here told a different story than the ones in his usual circles. Children's bikes lay in front yards that needed mowing. Cars from the early 2000s sat in driveways, some with duct tape holding side mirrors in place. Small houses with peeling paint stood shoulder to shoulder, their windows covered with sheets instead of expensive curtains. This was real America, the America that Silicon Valley's wealth often forgot existed just miles away from their campuses. Marcus walked slowly, taking it all in. A man in his 50s was already out, working on his car in the driveway, grease up to his elbows. 2 women chatted on a porch while their children played in the yard. An elderly woman watered plants in her tiny front garden, wearing a house dress that had probably been in her closet since the 1980s. His stomach rumbled, reminding him he'd skipped breakfast. That's when he spotted it, tucked between a laundromat where the sign read "Wash and Dry to $50" and a dollar store with bars on the windows. A small diner called Sunrise Cafe. The building had seen better days. The yellow paint was peeling in strips, revealing layers of previous colors underneath, like an archaeological dig of the building's history. The neon sign in the window flickered intermittently, the eye in Sunrise completely dark. But through the smudged glass, Marcus could see the place was busy with locals, always a good sign. The bell above the door chimed as he entered, a sound that probably hadn't changed in 40 years. The interior was exactly what he expected. A long formica counter with red vinyl stools, booths along the windows with matching red vinyl seats patched here and there with duct tape, and black and white checkered linoleum floors that had been mopped so many times the pattern was fading in the high-traffic areas. The smell hit him immediately. Coffee, bacon, pancakes, and something else. The smell of a place that had been serving the same comfort food for decades. It smelled like every diner his mother had ever worked in when he was growing up, and the familiarity of it made something in his chest tighten with nostalgia. Marcus took a seat at the counter, choosing a stool near the end where he could observe the whole restaurant. An elderly waitress approached, her gray hair pulled back in a practical bun, her pink uniform dress the kind that snapped up the front. Her name tag read Betty and her smile was genuine, if tired. "Coffee, hon?" she asked, already reaching for the pot on the warmer. "Please," Marcus replied, his voice warm and friendly. He'd learned long ago that how you treated service workers said everything about your character. "And I'll take whatever your breakfast special is. I'm sure it's good." Betty's smile widened a bit. "You'd be right about that. 2 eggs any style, bacon or sausage, hash browns and toast. Coffee's included. $7.95. Sounds perfect. Over easy on the eggs, bacon, and whole wheat toast if you have it. Coming right up, sweetheart." As Betty walked away to put in his order, Marcus took in the other customers. A group of construction workers occupied a large booth, their clothes covered in drywall dust, their conversation loud and punctuated with laughter. They were probably on their morning break from a job site nearby. In another booth, a young couple sat close together, sharing a single plate of pancakes between them, their hands intertwined on the table. Marcus noticed they were both wearing work uniforms, probably heading to their jobs after this meal, making every dollar count. An elderly man sat alone by the window, reading the newspaper, a cup of coffee cooling beside him. The paper was 2 days old, Marcus noticed, probably picked up for free from somewhere. At another table, a tired-looking woman in scrubs ate quickly, clearly trying to grab a meal between shifts at the hospital. These were Marcus's people, even if they didn't know it. These were the people he'd grown up with, the people his mother had worked alongside for years. He'd been the kid doing homework in booths just like these while his mom finished her shift, the boy who'd learned to make a single soda last 3 hours. The door chimed again, and the atmosphere in the diner shifted. A woman entered, and she was so out of place in the Sunrise Cafe that she might as well have arrived in a spaceship. She wore a designer dress that Marcus recognized as Prada, probably cost around $4,000. Her handbag was a Birkin, and Marcus knew enough about fashion from the women he dated to know that bag cost more than most of the cars parked outside. Her heels were Louboutin, the signature red soles clicking against the linoleum like little judgments with each step. But it wasn't her expensive clothes that caught Marcus's attention. It was the 2 small children she was dragging behind her. They were twins, clearly, identical in every way except for their haircuts. A boy and a girl, neither could have been older than 7. The boy had short dark hair and wore jeans with a superhero t-shirt that had seen better days. The girl had her dark hair into braids and wore a simple dress that was clean but faded from many washings. What struck Marcus most was their expressions. The boy's face was set in a mask of stubborn defiance, his jaw clenched, his eyes hard in a way no 7-year-old's eyes should be. The girl looked terrified, her eyes already red-rimmed from crying, her free hand clutching a small stuffed rabbit that had been loved nearly to pieces. The woman, who Marcus would soon learn was named Victoria, didn't guide the children to a booth. She shoved them. Roughly, her perfectly manicured hand with its blood-red nails pushed them hard enough that the little girl stumbled, catching herself on the edge of the table. The boy immediately wrapped a protective arm around his sister, shooting a look of pure hatred at the woman. Marcus felt every muscle in his body tense. His hands gripped his coffee cup so hard he had to consciously force himself to loosen his grip before he broke it. "Sit down and don't you dare embarrass me in public," Victoria hissed, loud enough for several nearby tables to hear. "I don't want to hear a single word from either of you. Do you understand me?" The children nodded silently, sliding into the booth. They sat close together, the boy still keeping one arm around his sister. Their eyes stayed down, fixed on the table. This wasn't the first time they'd been treated this way. Marcus could tell from their practiced compliance, the way they made themselves small and quiet. These children had learned to survive. Several other customers had noticed the scene. The construction workers exchanged glances. An older woman in another booth frowned disapprovingly, but nobody said anything. Nobody wanted to get involved. It was easier to look away, to pretend they hadn't seen anything. But Marcus couldn't look away. He kept his eyes on his coffee, but his attention was completely focused on the booth behind him. Victoria slid into the seat across from the children, not bothering to lower her voice. "I didn't want to bring you to brats here in the first place," she announced, pulling out her phone and scrolling through it. "But your useless father insisted I had to feed you before school, as if I don't have better things to do with my Thursday morning." Marcus's jaw clenched. He caught Betty's eye as she brought over his breakfast. The older woman's expression was tight, angry, but helpless. She'd probably seen this kind of thing before too. The diner was on the edge of her section, but there wasn't much she could do without risking her job. "Thank you," Marcus said quietly as she set down his plate. Betty nodded, understanding passing between them. "My name is Victoria," the woman said loudly when Betty approached their booth, clearly wanting everyone in the diner to hear. "Victoria Ashford. I'll have the egg white omelet with fresh vegetables, no cheese, a side of fresh fruit, and green tea. Make sure the tea is actually hot this time." "I was here last week and it was barely warm." Betty's pencil paused on her notepad. "And for the children?" "These two." Victoria waved her hand dismissively at the twins without looking up from her phone. "Can share one order of pancakes. The small stack. They don't need much. Children today are too overweight anyway." Marcus felt his fork freeze halfway to his mouth. Betty's lips pressed into a thin line. "Ma'am, with respect, they're growing children. They might need a bit more than, did I ask for your nutritional advice?" Victoria's head snapped up, her eyes flashing. "Did I ask for your opinion at all? I said one small stack of pancakes to share. That's it. Are you capable of writing that down, or do I need to speak to your manager?" The diner had gone noticeably quieter. Conversations didn't stop entirely, but they lowered to murmurs as people's attention shifted to the drama unfolding. Betty's hand trembled slightly as she wrote down the order. Marcus had been watching her, and he saw the moment she made a decision. Her other hand slipped into her apron pocket, and he caught the subtle movement of her thumb on her phone screen. She was recording. "Coming right up," Betty said, her voice professionally neutral despite the anger Marcus could see in her eyes. As Betty walked away, Victoria leaned across the table toward the children. "You know what your problem is." Her voice dripped with venom. "You're just like your dead mother, completely worthless. Your father only married me because he needed someone who could actually make something of themselves, not some nobody waitress who could barely keep a roof over your heads." Marcus's fork clattered against his plate. Several people turned to look, but he barely noticed. Every fiber of his being wanted to stand up and confront this woman, but years of controlling his emotions in high-stakes business meetings kept him in his seat. Not yet. He needed to see how far this would go. The little girl's lip trembled. A single tear rolled down her cheek. The boy's arm tightened around her, and Marcus saw his jaw clench even harder. That kid was holding back tears through sheer force of will. I don't know why I agreed to this ridiculous arrangement, Victoria continued, loudly enough that the entire diner could hear every word. She seemed to be enjoying the audience. I should have stayed at the spa this morning, but no, your father had to go out of town for his pathetic little sales job, and I got stuck babysitting you to mistakes. That word, mistakes. It hung in the air like poison gas, spreading to every corner of the diner. The construction workers had stopped eating entirely. The young couple sharing pancakes looked horrified. Even the elderly man with the newspaper had lowered it to stare at Victoria with open disapproval. Marcus set down his fork very carefully. His hands were shaking with suppressed rage. He had to grip the edge of the counter to keep himself from doing something he might regret. The boy finally spoke. His voice was small, but there was steel in it. Our mom wasn't worthless. The diner collectively held its breath. Victoria's head whipped around so fast her perfectly styled hair actually moved. What did you just say to me? The boy swallowed hard, but he didn't back down. Marcus watched him straighten his spine, his protective arm still around his sister. I said our mom wasn't worthless. She loved us. She worked hard. The sound of Victoria's palm slamming on the table made half the diner jump. Coffee cups rattled. Silverware clinked against plates. You ungrateful little brat, Victoria snarled, her face contorting with rage. The mask of sophistication had slipped completely. After everything I've done for you, putting up with you two, feeding you, keeping a roof over your ungrateful heads. And this is the thanks I get? Back talk, that's enough. The voice came from Marcus. He hadn't planned to speak. The words simply came out, propelled by something deeper than thought. His voice was calm, quiet even, but it carried an authority that made everyone in the diner turn to look. Victoria's eyes narrowed as they landed on the man in the worn flannel shirt and work boots sitting at the counter. She looked him up and down, her lip curling in disgust. Excuse me, who the hell do you think you're talking to? Marcus slowly turned on his stool to face her fully. He didn't stand up yet. He didn't raise his voice. But something in his expression, in the way he held himself, made Victoria's confident sneer falter slightly. I think I'm talking to someone who doesn't deserve to be in the same room as those children, let alone responsible for them. The diner went completely silent. Even the sounds from the kitchen seemed to dim. Victoria's face flushed red. She stood up, her designer bag clutched in her hand like a weapon. How dare you? You don't know anything about my life, about what I deal with, about the burden of the burden. Marcus interrupted, his voice still calm, but with an edge now that could cut glass. Those children are a burden to you. I didn't say you called them mistakes. Marcus stood now, his full height making Victoria take an involuntary step back. You said their mother was worthless. You're starving them in public. So yes, I know enough. Other customers began to murmur in agreement. One of the construction workers muttered, "He's right." The older woman in the booth said loudly, "Shame on you, treating children like that." Victoria looked around, seeing that the entire diner had turned against her. Her face went from red to almost purple. You're just some nobody construction worker, she spat. You have no idea who you're dealing with. My husband knows people, important people. I could have you, you could have me what? Marcus took a step closer, and despite her expensive heels, he still towered over her. Fired from my construction job? Please, enlighten me about these important people you know. Victoria opened her mouth, then closed it, clearly trying to think of a comeback. She wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone she considered beneath her. My husband, she finally said, her voice shaking with rage, is a very successful businessman. When he hears about this, about how you disrespected me, about how all of you, she swept her arm around the diner, ganged up on me, your husband, Marcus interrupted again, his voice dropping to something dangerous, left his children with you. The same woman who just called them mistakes. What does that say about him? Victoria's mouth opened and closed like a fish. No words came out. Those kids, Marcus continued, gesturing to the booth where the twins sat watching with wide eyes, didn't ask to be here. They didn't ask to lose their mother. They didn't ask for any of this. And you treat them like they're an inconvenience to your spa appointments. You don't understand. Victoria tried again, her voice rising to a near shriek. You don't know what it's like trying to deal with someone else's brats, trying to make a relationship work when he comes with baggage they're not baggage, Marcus said, his voice hard as stone now. They're children, human beings who deserve love and respect and basic human decency. Betty chose that moment to step forward, her phone held up. And just so you know, she said, her voice strong despite her age, I've been recording this entire conversation, every word. Victoria's face went from purple to white in an instant. You what? Recorded it, Betty repeated calmly. She looked at Marcus with something like respect in her eyes. And I already sent it to the police. They should be here any minute, as if on cue. The sound of a siren became audible in the distance, growing closer. Victoria looked like she'd been slapped. Her eyes darted from Betty to Marcus to the other customers, all of whom were watching her with varying expressions of disgust and satisfaction. You can't do this, she stammered. I have rights. You can't just record me without my permission. This is a public space. One of the construction workers called out. He was a large man with arms like tree trunks. And lady, you just verbally abused the kids in front of about 20 witnesses. I'd say you're in some trouble. The police cruiser pulled into the parking lot, its lights flashing. Through the window, Marcus could see two officers getting out. Victoria grabbed her Birkin bag and started backing toward the door. This isn't over. I have lawyers. You have nothing, Marcus said quietly. Nothing except a video recording of you abusing children and about to be questioned by the police. The door opened and two officers entered, a male and female, both looking professional and alert. We got a call about a disturbance involving minors, the female officer said, her hand resting casually near her belt. Betty stepped forward. Officers, I'm the one who called. This woman, she pointed at Victoria, has been verbally abusing these two children. I have it all on video if you need it. The officers looked at Victoria, then at the twins who were still huddled together in the booth, then back at Victoria. The male officer pulled out a notebook. Ma'am, we're going to need to ask you some questions, and we'll need to see some identification. This is ridiculous, Victoria sputtered, but her voice had lost its power. She was scared now. Marcus could see it. I'm their stepmother. I have every right to actually, the female officer said, checking something on her radio. According to the records we just pulled, you're not their stepmother. You're their father's girlfriend. You have no legal relationship to these children at all. Victoria's face went gray. That's not we're engaged. Where do you have legal guardianship papers? The officer asked. Their father left them with me. Where is their father now? He's out of town, Montana, for business. He left me in charge. The female officer exchanged a look with her partner. Ma'am, you cannot be left in charge of minor children without legal guardianship. Especially, she glanced at Betty's phone, when there's evidence of verbal abuse. I want a lawyer, Victoria said, her voice now small and scared. That's your right, the male officer said. But first, we need to sort out the situation with these children. We'll need to contact their father and Child Protective Services. Marcus stepped forward. Officers, while you're sorting this out, may I suggest the children stay here where they're safe and fed rather than being traumatized further? The female officer looked at Marcus, really seeing him for the first time. And you are? Just a concerned citizen, Marcus said. But I'm willing to stay with them until their father can be reached. The officer nodded slowly. We appreciate that, sir. Let us take this woman outside to get her statement, and we'll be back to talk to the children. As Victoria was escorted out, still protesting about her rights and her lawyer, the diner erupted in conversation. The construction workers gave Marcus approving nods. The elderly woman clapped softly. Betty wiped tears from her eyes. Marcus turned to the booth where the twins sat. They were still holding each other, but now they were staring at him with something between awe and confusion. He walked over slowly and knelt down beside the booth so he was at their eye level. Up close, he could see the tear tracks on both their faces. The little girl's rabbit was clutched so tight her knuckles were white. Hey, he said gently, his voice soft. You two okay? The little girl looked at him with huge, terrified eyes. Are we in trouble? Marcus felt something in his chest crack. No, sweetheart. You're not in trouble. You didn't do anything wrong. Not one single thing. The boy was studying Marcus carefully, his eyes sharp and assessing. Are you really just a construction worker? Smart kid. Very smart kid. Marcus smiled slightly. Why would you ask that? Because construction workers don't usually talk like that, the boy said carefully. Like they're used to people listening to them. Like they're in charge. Marcus's smile widened. This kid was sharp as a tack. You're pretty observant. What's your name? Daniel, the boy said. This is my sister, Emma. Well, Daniel and Emma, Marcus said. My name is Marcus, and I promise you, everything is going to be okay. Emma's lip trembled. Is she coming back? Her voice was barely a whisper, rough from crying. Before Marcus could answer, Betty appeared beside them with 2 plates. Each held a full stack of pancakes, bacon, eggs, and hash browns, far more than Victoria had ordered. Here you go, babies, Betty said, her voice warm. You eat up now. On the house, the children stared at the food like they couldn't believe it was real. It's okay, Marcus encouraged. You can eat. You're safe now. Slowly, hesitantly, Daniel picked up a fork. Emma followed his lead. They ate like they were starving, which Marcus realized with growing anger they probably were. The female officer returned to the diner, her partner staying outside with Victoria. She approached Marcus and the children's booth. Sir, we're trying to contact their father, but he's apparently in a rural area with spotty cell service. We've left several messages. She looked at the children with concern. In the meantime, we need to figure out temporary custody. What are the options? Marcus asked. Well, normally, if we can't reach a parent or legal guardian, they'd go to emergency foster care until no, the word came out of Marcus before he could stop himself. Everyone looked at him. The children's eyes went wide. No, the officer repeated. Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He stood up and pulled out his wallet, removing his driver's license and business card. Officer, my name is Marcus Chen. He handed her the cards. I'd like to arrange temporary custody of these children until their father can be reached. The officer looked at the cards. Her eyes widened. She looked at Marcus, then at the cards again, then at Marcus's clothes. Marcus Chen, the Marcus Chen. The diner went quiet again. People leaned in, trying to hear. Yes, Marcus confirmed. I have the resources to provide immediate safe housing, food, and care for these children. I'll have my legal team draw up the necessary paperwork within the hour. The officer was clearly out of her depth. Sir, this is highly unusual. I'll need to call my supervisor. Please do, Marcus said calmly. But while you're doing that, these children are eating a proper breakfast, and that woman, he nodded toward the window where Victoria stood by the police car looking furious, is not going anywhere near them. Agreed? The officer nodded slowly. Agreed. Let me make some calls. As she stepped away, Daniel looked at Marcus with new understanding in his young eyes. You're not a construction worker at all, are you? Marcus sat back down, meeting the boy's gaze. No, but I was once a kid whose mom worked 3 jobs to feed him. I know what it's like to be hungry. I know what it's like when adults fail you. And I know what it's like to need someone to show up and help. Why are you dressed like that then? Daniel asked. If you're rich? Because sometimes, Marcus said slowly, you learn the most about people when they don't know who you are. And sometimes you learn the most about yourself the same way. Emma had stopped eating to listen. Are you really going to help us? Marcus looked at both of them, these 2 brave, scared children who'd been through too much already. I'm not just going to help you. I'm going to make sure you're safe and taken care of. I promise you that. Promises get broken, Daniel said, his voice hard with the cynicism of a child who'd been disappointed too many times. Not mine, Marcus said firmly. When I make a promise, I keep it. Always. Over the next hour, Marcus's world collided with his disguise in spectacular fashion. His legal team arrived first, 3 lawyers in expensive suits carrying briefcases, looking completely out of place in the small diner. Then his personal assistant, Jennifer, a sharp woman in her 40s who'd worked with Marcus for over a decade. Mr. Chen, she said, giving his outfit a quick glance but knowing better than to comment, I've prepared the paperwork for emergency guardianship. We just need the police approval and a family court judge's signature. The police supervisor had arrived by then, a gray-haired man named Captain Morrison who'd seen everything in his 30 years on the force, but even he seemed thrown by the situation. Mr. Chen, he said, shaking Marcus's hand, this is unprecedented. You understand we need to do thorough background checks, even for someone of your status. I would expect nothing less, Marcus replied. The safety of these children is what matters. Check whatever you need to check. My record is clean. I can provide references, financial statements, anything you need. While the adults talked, Daniel and Emma ate their breakfast, watching everything with wide eyes. Other customers lingered, no longer pretending not to watch. This was the most exciting thing that had happened in the Sunrise Cafe in years. Betty kept their juice glasses full and made sure they had everything they needed, treating them with a grandmother's care. Within 2 hours, the paperwork was signed. The judge, reached by phone, had approved emergency temporary custody pending the father's return and a full hearing. Victoria had been released with a citation for child endangerment and a restraining order keeping her away from the children. Marcus's driver arrived with his actual car, a sleek black Mercedes that made Daniel's eyes go wide. That's yours, he breathed. That's mine, Marcus confirmed. But first, we need to finish here. He walked over to where Betty stood behind the counter. The old waitress had tears in her eyes. You're a good man, she said simply. Marcus pulled out his wallet and laid 5 $100 bills on the counter. For your courage, for recording, for standing up for them when no one else did. Betty's hands shook as she looked at the money. "Sir, I can't." "You can," Marcus said firmly. "And please, take the rest of the day off. Paid. I'm buying out the diner for the day. Everyone's meals are on me." The diner erupted in surprised thanks. The construction workers stood up to shake Marcus's hand. The elderly man saluted him with his coffee cup. The young couple hugged each other, crying. As Marcus prepared to leave with the twins, Daniel tugged on his sleeve. "Why did you give her all that money? Just for recording?" Marcus knelt down again. "Daniel, that woman did something incredibly brave. She stood up for you when she didn't have to. She risked making a scene, potentially her job, all to protect the children she'd never met before. That kind of courage deserves to be rewarded, but $500 is nothing compared to the value of what she did," Marcus finished. "Money is just a tool, Daniel. What matters is what you do with it." Remember that. The drive to Marcus's estate was quiet. Both children pressed their faces to the window, watching as the neighborhoods changed from working class to wealthy, the houses growing larger, the lawns more manicured, the cars and driveways more expensive. "Where are we going?" Emma finally asked, her voice small and scared again. "Home," Marcus said. "My home, where you'll be safe." When they pulled through the gates of Marcus's property, both children gasped audibly. The estate sprawled across 5 acres with perfectly landscaped gardens, a large fountain in the circular driveway, and a mansion that looked like something out of a movie. "You live here?" Daniel breathed, his face pressed against the window. "By yourself?" "Usually," Marcus admitted. "It's too big for one person. Always has been. But I think it'll be just right for 3 of us, at least for a while." His housekeeper, Maria, was already waiting at the front door. Marcus had called ahead, explaining the situation. She was a warm woman in her 50s who'd worked for Marcus for 8 years, and he trusted her completely. She took one look at the twins and immediately opened her arms. "Oh, you poor babies. Come here, come in. I've got cookies in the kitchen and we need to get you settled." Over the next few days, while Marcus's lawyers worked to track down the children's father, Daniel and Emma slowly began to trust that this wasn't temporary, that they weren't going to be sent away. Marcus set up rooms for each of them, took them shopping for clothes and toys, made sure they had everything they needed. But more than that, he spent time with them. Real time. He ate breakfast with them every morning, listening as they slowly opened up about their lives. He helped Emma with her reading, discovering she was behind grade level because Victoria had refused to help with homework. He played chess with Daniel, who turned out to be brilliant at strategy, seeing moves ahead that surprised even Marcus. "You're really good at this," Marcus said after Daniel beat him for the 3rd time in a row. "My mom taught me," Daniel said quietly, moving a pawn. Before she got sick, it was the first time either child had really talked about their mother. Marcus set down the chess piece he'd been holding and gave Daniel his full attention. "Tell me about her," he said gently. And Daniel did. Emma joined them, both children painting a picture of Sarah Morrison, a woman who'd worked as a waitress at 3 different restaurants to support her family, who sang to them every night before bed, who made them feel safe and loved even when money was tight and the bills were piling up. "She got cancer," Emma whispered, her eyes filling with tears. "Breast cancer. It came back 3 times. Dad said the medical bills took everything. We lost our house, our car, everything." Marcus felt his chest tighten. "Is that when your father met Victoria?" Daniel nodded, his jaw clenching. "He was so sad after Mom died. He cried all the time. He couldn't work properly. Then he met Victoria at some business conference. She seemed nice at first. She pretended to like us, Emma added. She bought us presents, took us places. Dad was so happy to have someone help. He thought she cared about us, but she didn't, Daniel said flatly. After a few months, she started changing. She'd be nice when Dad was around, but when he left for work trips, she'd get mean. She said we were in the way, that we reminded her that Dad had a whole life before her. We tried to tell Dad, Emma said, tears running down her cheeks now, but he didn't believe us. He said we were being difficult, that we needed to give Victoria a chance. Marcus felt anger building in his chest again, but he kept his voice calm. That must have been very hard. We stopped trying to tell him, Daniel said. It just made things worse. He'd get mad at us for making trouble, so we just tried to stay out of her way. You shouldn't have had to do that, Marcus said firmly. Children shouldn't have to make themselves invisible in their own homes. You deserved better. You still deserve better. Is that why you're doing all this? Emma asked. Because you feel sorry for us? Marcus shook his head. No, Emma, I'm doing this because every child deserves to feel safe and loved. Because I have the power to help, and I believe that power should be used to protect people who can't protect themselves. And because, he paused, making sure both children were looking at him, I see myself in you. I see the kid I was, trying to survive, trying to be strong, carrying burdens no child should carry. It was on the 5th day that Marcus's lawyers finally managed to track down James Morrison, the children's father. He'd been working at a sales conference in rural Montana, in an area with poor cell service. When he finally got the dozens of messages from the police, from Marcus's lawyers, from Child Protective Services, he drove straight through the night, 14 hours without stopping. Marcus met him in his office, a formal space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the valley. It was designed to intimidate, and it usually worked. But James Morrison wasn't intimidated. He was terrified. Where are my children? Were his first words as he burst through the door. The lawyers said they're here, that they're safe, but I need to see them. I need to sit down, Mr. Morrison, Marcus said, his voice neutral but commanding. James Morrison was a thin man in his late 30s, his suit wrinkled from the long drive, his eyes red from exhaustion and tears. He sat on the edge of the leather chair across from Marcus's desk, his hands gripping his knees so hard his knuckles were white. Please, he said, his voice breaking. Please tell me they're okay. The police said Victoria was arrested, that there was some incident. Your children are fine, Marcus said. Physically, they're healthy. Emotionally, they're traumatized. But they're safe now. James buried his face in his hands. Oh God. What did she do? What did that woman do to my kids? Marcus pulled up the video on his computer and turned the screen toward James. Watch this. He played the recording Betty had made at the diner. All of it. Victoria's venom, her cruelty, the way she treated the children like they were nothing. James's face went from pale to gray to green as he watched. When the video ended with Victoria being escorted out by police, James was openly sobbing. I didn't know, he gasped. I swear to God, I didn't know she was like that. She told me the kids were just being difficult, that they needed discipline. I thought you thought wrong, Marcus said, his voice hard. Mr. Morrison, you left your children with someone who had no legal rights to them, someone who verbally abused them, someone who starved them. Do you understand how serious this is? I know, James whispered. I know. After Sarah died, I fell apart. I couldn't handle being a single parent, working full-time, dealing with the bills. When Victoria came along and offered to help, I thought it was a miracle. I thought she cared. Did you ever ask your children how they felt about her? James flinched. They said they didn't like her. But I thought they were just being difficult because they missed their mom. I thought they needed time to adjust. They told you the truth, Marcus said coldly. And you didn't listen. You chose a woman you'd known for less than a year over your own children's safety and happiness. I was desperate, James said, but his voice had no strength. He knew how weak that sounded. Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying the man across from him. He saw exhaustion, grief, and genuine remorse, but he also saw weakness. A man who'd made the easy choice instead of the right one. Mr. Morrison, Marcus said slowly, I'm going to be very direct with you. Your children deserve better than what you've been giving them. I know, James whispered. I'll do better. I'll leave Victoria. I'll find a better job. I want to adopt them. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. James's head snapped up, his mouth falling open. What? I want to adopt Daniel and Emma, Marcus repeated calmly, as if he were discussing a business transaction, legally and permanently. You can't, they're my children, you can't just, can I? Marcus leaned forward. Let me be very clear about your situation, Mr. Morrison. You abandoned your children with someone who abused them. You ignored their cries for help. You prioritized your own needs over their safety. Any family court in the country would find you negligent at best. But I love them, James protested weakly. They're all I have left of Sarah. Then why did you treat them like they were expendable? Marcus's voice was sharp now, cutting. Love isn't just a feeling, Mr. Morrison. It's action. It's sacrifice. It's putting your children first even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. James was crying openly now, his whole body shaking. Please, please don't take them from me. I'll do anything. I'll change. I swear I'll change. Marcus felt a flicker of sympathy, but he pushed it down. This wasn't about James's feelings. It was about two children who deserved stability and safety. Mr. Morrison, let me ask you something. Where would you even take them? What's your plan? James opened his mouth, then closed it. He had no answer. Exactly, Marcus said. You're a traveling salesman. You said yourself the medical bills destroyed you financially. How will you support them? Where will you live? What happens the next time you're desperate and another Victoria comes along? James had no answers. He just sat there, defeated, staring at his hands. Marcus opened a drawer and pulled out a document. My lawyers prepared this. It's a proposal. What kind of proposal? James asked warily. I legally adopt Daniel and Emma. They live with me, get the best education, the best opportunities, everything they need. But Marcus held up a hand as James started to protest. You remain in their lives. You visit regularly. You're still their father. You just let me provide the stability they need right now. James stared at the document like it was a snake that might bite him. Why would you do this? You don't even know them. I know enough, Marcus said. I know they're smart, resilient, and brave. I know they deserve a chance at a real childhood. And I know I have the resources to give them that chance. And if I say no, Marcus's expression hardened. Then I'll fight you in court. And I have to tell you, Mr. Morrison, I have very good lawyers, the best that money can buy. I'll bring in child psychologists who will testify about the trauma your choices have caused. I'll show that video to a judge. I'll demonstrate that you're financially unable to care for them properly. And I'll win, but it will be ugly, traumatic for Daniel and Emma, and you'll end up losing them anyway with no visitation rights whatsoever. It was harsh, but it was true. James knew it too. He could see it in the way the man's shoulders slumped in defeat. Can I? James's voice cracked. Can I at least see them? Before I decide? Marcus stood up. They're in the library. But Mr. Morrison, one more thing. Yes, if you try to manipulate them, if you try to make them feel guilty for wanting to stay here, if you do anything that puts your feelings above their well-being, I will end this conversation immediately and you'll never see them again outside of supervised visits. Do we understand each other? James nodded, too defeated to argue. Marcus led him through the mansion. With each room they passed, James's eyes widened a little more. The art on the walls, the high ceilings, the obvious wealth. His children would want for nothing here. When they reached the library, Daniel and Emma were curled up together on a large leather sofa, reading. Emma was working through a picture book while Daniel helped her with the harder words. They looked up when the door opened. "Dad!" Emma jumped up and ran to James, throwing her arms around him. Daniel followed more slowly, but his hug was just as tight. Marcus stepped back, giving them privacy, but he watched carefully. He saw the genuine love between father and children, but he also saw something else. When they pulled away from James, both children instinctively moved back toward where Marcus stood. They felt safe with him now. In just 5 days, Marcus had given them something their father hadn't been able to provide in years: security. James saw it too. Marcus watched the man's face crumple as he realized his children had found a new protector, someone who made them feel safer than he did. They talked for over an hour. James asked about what they'd been doing, and Daniel excitedly told him about the chess games, the huge library, the garden where they'd found a family of rabbits. Emma showed him her new favorite books and told him about the cookies Maria made. "Are you happy here?" James asked quietly. Both children looked at Marcus, then back at their father, then at each other. "Dad," Daniel said carefully, "we love you, but Marcus makes us feel safe, and we haven't felt safe in a long time." Emma nodded, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "He doesn't yell, and he listens when we talk, and he keeps his promises." James closed his eyes, tears streaming down his face. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry I failed you." "You didn't fail us completely," Daniel said, showing wisdom beyond his years. You needed help. And now we have help." After James left the room, leaving the children to continue their reading, he and Marcus returned to the office. James's face was red and blotchy from crying, but there was something new in his expression: acceptance. "I'll sign," he said quietly, "on one condition." "What's that?" "I want to be part of their lives. Real visits, not just holidays. I want to be their father still, even if you're giving them what I can't." Marcus extended his hand across the desk. "Mr. Morrison, I'm not trying to replace you. I'm not trying to erase you from their lives. I'm trying to be what they need right now. And yes, you'll have regular, scheduled visits. You'll always be their father. I'm the safety net you couldn't be." James took his hand, shaking it with a grip that trembled. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick, "for saving them, for being what I couldn't be, for giving them a chance." The legal process took 3 months. During that time, Daniel and Emma absolutely thrived. They started at a prestigious private school where the teachers quickly identified Emma's learning gaps and helped her catch up. She joined the school choir, her voice pure and sweet in a way that made Marcus's chest tight with pride every time he heard her sing. Daniel joined the chess club and the debate team. His sharp mind found outlets in both, and within 2 months he was competing at the state level in chess. Marcus cut back dramatically on his work travel. His partners at the venture capital firm were surprised, but understanding when he explained. He attended every parent-teacher conference, every school play, every chess tournament. He learned to braid Emma's hair, though his first attempts were laughably bad and Maria had to step in to help. He learned to explain complex business concepts in ways Daniel could understand, watching the boy's eyes light up with fascination. James visited every other weekend, just as promised. At first, the visits were awkward and painful. But slowly, with the pressure of being their sole provider removed, James started to become a better father. He played with them instead of being exhausted. He listened to their stories instead of being distracted by bills. He started therapy to deal with his grief over Sarah and his guilt over his failures. Marcus gave James space to rebuild his relationship with his children, never interfering, always supportive. Gradually, James stopped looking at Marcus with resentment and started looking at him with gratitude. 6 months after the adoption was finalized, Marcus threw a party for Emma's 8th birthday. It was a small gathering. Close friends, some of the household staff, Daniel's chess club friends, Emma's choir classmates, and James. Marcus had hired a professional party planner who transformed the garden into a wonderland with a petting zoo, a magician, and a table groaning with presents. But Emma's favorite gift wasn't expensive. It was a photo album James had made, filled with pictures of Sarah, the mother the twins barely remembered. "So you never forget her," James said quietly as Emma flipped through the pages, tears streaming down her face. "So you always know where you came from." Marcus stood beside Daniel, watching Emma hug her father while looking at pictures of the mother she'd lost too soon. "That was nice of him," Daniel said quietly. "It was," Marcus agreed. "Your father loves you very much, Daniel. He always has. He just got lost for a while. But you found us," Daniel said, looking up at Marcus. "When we needed someone most, you found us." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "I think maybe you found me too." That night, after all the guests had left and James had driven home, Marcus went through his usual routine of tucking the children into bed. It had become his favorite part of every day, these quiet moments with Emma and Daniel. He tucked Emma in first, pulling her princess-themed comforter up to her chin and making sure her stuffed rabbit was within reach. "Marcus," she said sleepily. "Yes, sweetheart. Can I ask you something?" "Anything." Emma bit her lip, looking nervous. Can Daniel and I call you something different?" Instead of Marcus, his heart skipped. "What would you like to call me?" She looked at Daniel's room, then back at Marcus. "We talked about it. We know we still have our first dad, and we love him. But you're our dad to now. The dad who keeps us safe and makes us feel loved every day. So, can we call you Dad? Is that okay?" Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. In his entire life, all his success, all his achievements, nothing had ever meant more than this moment. "I would be honored," he managed to say, his voice rough with emotion. Emma smiled, her eyes already closing with sleep. "Good night, Dad. Good night, Emma. Sweet dreams." He moved to Daniel's room next. The boy was still awake, reading a book about chess strategies by lamplight. "Emma asked you, didn't she?" Daniel said without looking up from his book. "She did." Daniel finally looked at Marcus, his expression serious. "I just want you to know, we talked about it a lot. About what to call you." "We know it's a big deal." "It is," Marcus agreed, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Mom used to tell us that family isn't just about blood," Daniel continued, closing his book. "She said family is about who shows up, who stays, who fights for you even when it's hard. Your mom was a smart woman. She was." Daniel's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "And I think she'd really like you. I think she'd be happy that we found you." "Or that you found us." Marcus reached out and ruffled Daniel's hair affectionately. "I think I'd have liked her too." "So yeah," Daniel said, trying to sound casual but failing. "If it's okay with you, I'd like to call you Dad too." "You've earned it." Marcus pulled Daniel into a hug, This brilliant, brave boy who'd protected his sister through so much. You two are the best thing that ever happened to me, he said quietly. I want you to know that. We know, Daniel said, hugging him back fiercely. We know, Dad. As Marcus turned off the light and closed Daniel's door, he stood in the hallway for a long moment, collecting himself. His face was wet with tears, but they were good tears, happy tears. He'd walked into the Sunrise Cafe 6 months ago expecting nothing more than a quiet breakfast and a chance to observe normal life. Instead, he'd found something he didn't even know he'd been missing: a family, a purpose beyond building companies and making money. 2 children who needed him as much as he, it turned out, needed them. Sometimes the universe puts you exactly where you need to be at exactly the right time. Marcus had thought he was in disguise to observe the world, to stay grounded, to remember his roots. But really, he'd been in disguise so that 2 children could see who he truly was. Not a billionaire, not an investor, not someone defined by his bank account, but someone who would show up and fight for them when they needed it most. And in return, Daniel and Emma had given him something all his money could never buy: the privilege of being called Dad. 3 years later, Marcus stood in the audience of a packed concert hall, watching Emma sing a solo in her school's spring concert. Beside him, Daniel sat with his latest chess trophy on his lap, and James was on Daniel's other side, all of them beaming with pride. The girl on stage, now 10 years old and radiant with confidence, bore little resemblance to the terrified child Marcus had met in a diner. But sometimes, when she smiled, he could still see traces of that scared little girl who'd asked him if she was in trouble. After the concert, as they walked to the car, Emma slipped her hand into Marcus's on one side and James's on the other. 2 dads, she said happily. I'm the luckiest. James met Marcus's eyes over her head, and something unspoken passed between them. Gratitude, respect, partnership in raising these 2 remarkable children. We're the lucky ones, Marcus said, squeezing her hand. And he meant it, every word. Now let me ask you something. Have you ever witnessed someone being mistreated and wished you had the courage to speak up? Drop your story in the comments, because your voice matters and might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If this story reminded you that one person really can change lives, smash that like button and share this with someone who needs to remember that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they just show up when it matters most. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because next week's story will show you what happens when a janitor with a secret past watches a CEO bully his employees. You won't believe how this one ends. Real courage starts with showing up, and you showing up here matters.